I've always wanted to talk about euthanasia, but held off against it because, for one, I'm not entirely the most informed person on it, and secondly, because I wanted to educate myself on both sides of the argument before I came to a decision. And with the recent developments in the Supreme Court of Canada case, Carter versus Canada, I think that the time is once again ripe to talk about euthanasia. So what is my position on euthanasia? Well, that will be discussed at the end of this video, because I want to explain the thought process behind how I got there. And one thing that you'll notice is that my views are definitely not mainstream. I don't do that intentionally. I'm not some sort of hipster in that regard, but it's just that with all the hype about euthanasia, I think people are jumping the gun a little bit with the discussion on both sides. And I wanted to discuss as many facets of the problem as possible before reaching a conclusion. And you may agree with my views, you may agree with my position, you may not. But ultimately, I think the discussion is what counts. Purely from a civil rights perspective, everyone should be entitled to live their life the way they please, so long as it does not hurt other people. They should be free to pursue happiness. They should be free to do whatever they want within reason, and within reason being within the boundaries of the law, etc. And I believe that also encompasses the right to take their own life if they so choose. In my opinion, to conceive a child is a little bit selfish, just in the nature of the act itself. The child didn't ask to be born. Under any circumstance, regardless of whatever, rich or poor, whether you treat your child well or not, the child did not ask to be placed in that circumstance. The child has no authority in whether or not it is born in a good or a bad environment. So two people, when they conceive a child, are indulging in a bit of selfishness. And the least you can do for anyone, given that they did not ask to be born in this world, is to give them the right to kill themselves. I think that is only fair. To tell someone that they don't have the right to end their own life is one of the most arrogant things you can say to someone. They don't get to choose whether or not they were born. They don't have much choice over their upbringing. That's entirely up to their parents. And now when they're legal adults, you have the gall to tell them how to live their lives, when they can end their lives, if they can end their lives. That's pretty fucking arrogant, I think. My problem with legalizing euthanasia is not the civil rights perspective of it. It's not the morality of it. It's what it can lead to that I have a problem with. For example, what about people who are legally unable to decide for themselves, like mentally disabled people, like children, like elderly people who aren't of sane mind? What do you do in that scenario? Who makes the deciding call there? And I know this sounds really facile and quite, brainless, but what does this say about society, really? When we say, oh, you have debilitating physical pain, well, there's euthanasia. Medically assisted suicide. Knock yourself out. I don't want this to be some sort of knee-jerk reaction to cover up the issues that society has yet to face. Like, for example, people who have ALS, which is a terrible thing to be afflicted with. I understand that people who are suffering from ALS may want to end their lives before the disease takes over them. But at the same time, we should also be trying to focus our efforts on helping these people with better treatment, right? While I do support the right for these people to complete medically assisted suicide, to undergo euthanasia, I would also hope that society recognizes that these problems still exist and doesn't just brush them under the rug because these people can undergo euthanasia. Because let's be real here. The majority of people who are going to undergo euthanasia are people who, for all intents and purposes, are disadvantaged in society, whether they face some sort of debilitating physical disability, or whether they are mentally disabled, whether they are old and unable to seek expensive medical treatment, things like that. Here's a hypothetical situation I'm sure many of you are familiar with. A sick family member who is probably over the age of 65, right? And they rely on the care of their kin to provide them with financial assistance for their expensive medical treatment. This is not an uncommon situation, okay? Like, I'm sure many of you have at least faced a situation like this at one point in your lives, or has known someone who has to be put in this predicament. And while I would understand someone's desire to ease the financial burden off of their family members, how do we determine if they're in the right health to do so? What if they were coerced by their family members to do so? If they didn't want to end their lives and family couldn't continue with these expensive medical treatments, should the family be forced to pay, or should this person's life automatically be forfeit? I mean, these are all difficult questions with no easy answers. So, what is my position on euthanasia and assisted suicide? Well, I support it, but I'm also worried as to what it means for the law, what it means for legislators, and what it means for society as a whole. What concerns me the most is how we would treat marginalized populations, and how I hope we can continue to move forward with helping these people with their situations, while also giving them the right to end their lives in a painless way. I hope that you are all not too offended of my views on euthanasia, and if you guys see any problems with my position, then feel free to discuss it in the comment section. May the truth always be heard. Peace.